So welcome everyone. I'm very pleased to be here with Allison Miller, who is the coordinator for ePortfolios Australia, and she convenes their ePortfolio forum each year. Allison's a learning designer and has worked with lots of people around moving their courses online in a variety of contexts, and I'm really pleased to have her joining us today to speak a little bit about what's happening in Australia with learning design and with ePortfolios. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you, Tracy. I look forward to having a conversation with you.
Great. So we've been asking people about what it means to do the work that we do well online. So both in the current context, which of course has been a complete shift away from how most designers would think about how to move online, but also in terms of ePortfolios. And you have a long history of doing work, a really robust community of practice in Australia working on ePortfolios. So maybe you can just share a little bit about what you think it means to move online well and what it means to leverage ePortfolio practices and pedagogies in those kinds of moves based on what you're doing there.
Okay, so as you've mentioned, I've been involved in the ePortfolio area in Australia since about 2007 basically was when I first was made aware of this concept of ePortfolio, and basically from a very selfish perspective in that I needed to move up the ladder in my own career and was told that I needed to create this portfolio of evidence for 5 years prior. And I was a little bit miffed to be told that I needed to collect this evidence post the 5 years, and so I had to go back and find all this evidence and build the evidence and get support. Have I frozen? Yeah, look. I can't hear you now. I think you're on speaker, you're on mute too, sorry.
There we go. Yeah, that's always helpful. The other thing we can do if we're worried about the bandwidth issues is you could also just record yourself and send it to us. If that's easier, I don't know, what would you prefer? We can give this another whirl.
So I was going to say, do you want to try, like as I said, I had internet, excuse me, I don't know, you're not recording good. Yep. I've got, let me try my other end.
Hello everyone, welcome to this AAEEBL annual virtual event. I'm really pleased to be here with Allison Miller, who is a longtime portfolio person in Australia, and she's the coordinator of ePortfolios Australia, which is, a large community of practice there, and she convenes the ePortfolio forum each year, so she's got a lot of insight. She's also a learning designer, so she knows all about moves online and can speak to what's happened in our most current context, and also what we're going to hope to see in the future. So welcome, Allison. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm looking forward to having the conversation with you.
Me too. Well, one of the things that we're really asking all of our provocateurs to think about is what does it mean to do our work well online? Both given the context and our need to rapidly pivot to an online environment, given the pandemic, but also what does it mean to do portfolios well? And while we've had connections over the years with ePortfolios Australia and your community there and have learned a lot from you, the contexts are a little bit different. So I'd love to just get your sense of what it means to learn and teach well online, as well as use portfolio practices and pedagogies.
So maybe if I give a quick background of my own experience in terms of where I came to the ePortfolio journey. Around 2007, to move up my teaching career, I had to actually produce, a portfolio of evidence. So I was told if I wanted to move up the line, I needed to produce evidence from the last 5 years of my teaching career to actually get this next career promotion. And so I spent 100 hours basically recreating my practice from the the past, and was a little bit miffed that I was asked to do this and not told early on that this was something that was part of my career pathway, and I should have been supported along the way to collect evidence as I go. And I came to that point and realization that that the past is always going to, the future is always going to know about the past. And somebody introduced me to this concept about ePortfolio. And from that point forward, I really didn't stop talking about it. And got involved at a national level in a number of projects. But when that project funding fell away, what I found was there was still a community who was quite strong and wanted to continue being this community, even though there wasn't any government funding. So ePortfolios Australia is a true community of practice. There's a number of very professional and expert ePortfolio academics and learning designers who volunteer their time to bring together things like what you guys are doing, great professional development opportunities, great networking opportunities. And so that's, how I ended up in working with an understanding of what's going on around ePortfolio use in Australia. So maybe a little bit prior to COVID-19, a lot of our ePortfolio practice is university based. So that's from what I get to work with. I understand there's a lot happening in our schools, but for some reason we don't attract them in terms of our community of practice, in terms of ePortfolios Australia, but we do attract a lot of people either doing it or interested in using ePortfolio or ePortfolio practice in the university sector. So prior to COVID-19, what we're seeing was a lot of it was involved in either any areas that require accreditation. So once the students finish at the university and they go into their profession, they need to demonstrate they've got key capabilities. And so the ePortfolio practice worked beautifully to help the students build that portfolio or of evidence or experience or language that they could use to help them through the accreditation process. So mainly in the areas of education and health science type areas. And a little bit about employability too. So what kind of language you might use around communication. Now, since COVID-19, what we're seeing is obviously the universities, as well as all educational sectors within Australia, needing to move across to an online model of delivery in some form or shape. However, because the digital literacies, but also perhaps the pedagogical literacy of moving to an ePortfolio approach takes time. It's not something that we've seen people quickly use as an option to assess people differently or support learning differently. So a number of universities, or all of our universities, have just finished in the last few weeks, have had their traditional exams. They found doing these exams online quite intensive, quite labour intensive, and so they haven't actually moved there. But we're hoping as a community of practice that this is the time where we could be influencing people in terms of what makes a more authentic assessment process, as well as a more valuable process for the student now. So now's the time where, as a community, well, it's probably since about April, we've been trying to do things to raise people's awareness around what's possible around ePortfolio and ePortfolio assessment. So we're hoping what will come of that is within the maybe next semester, or at least maybe for 2021, that people's eyes have been opened, right? So people were traditionally, let me say it's an 80-20 model, very anecdotally, where 20% of the people get what it means to be online and where the benefits are pre-COVID-19, and 80% kind of was aware of it or had tasted it and didn't like it, and were keeping with the very traditional kind of model of everybody comes together. Whereas COVID-19 has kind of encouraged everybody to consider remote working and remote learning differently. So they've tasted it. They might not have done it well, they might not have experienced it well, but at least they understand that there is this other model and what potentially could be possible. So as a community practice, what we're really hoping is perhaps we can't change what's happened in the last 3 to 4 months in terms of use of ePortfolios, but now is really a time to influence how people could be using it either for the next semester or for 2021.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, and definitely part of the conversation that I've been having on my campus with faculty members as well is, just sort of thinking through what evidence of learning might they be asking their students to generate, and giving them some opportunities to think about how to leverage those. What our colleague Helen Chen calls folio thinking, that reflective capacity that we know students will be served well by developing, because that's of course transferable to lots of other contexts. And so I think it's a really nice opportunity, despite all the other side effects of being in the middle of a global pandemic, that it is opening up these spaces for conversation and thinking about the design of courses and how to redesign to really suit the needs of learners, to allow them to document what it is they're learning in courses or programs, and to leverage the good work of people like you and others in Australia and then in other parts of the world who've been using portfolio approaches for some time, so that we can help other people enjoy the great and authentic evidence of student learning that we've all seen. And so I think that's such a beautiful point that you made, which really is all about what we're trying to do in this virtual event, is to give people access to the community and to the resources and the approaches, so that they can be mindful about picking things that will work in their context, and hopefully set them up for success as we move into our next semesters, whether that's in our case in the fall, and in your case, I guess it would be spring.
So yeah, we'll go back in August, which is it would be still technically our winter here. So we don't have the long break in terms of change of semesters now. The other thing, if I can just add to that, I was just thinking, is also people's digital literacies have significantly changed, and therefore, if I kind of have my employability hat on, even people's concept of what does it mean to work. Where does it mean? How do you work now? So where traditionally you all got together in a physical space, just as like the teaching was. People are now going, okay, well, we've pivoted our businesses, including universities and other educational institutions, to enable people to do this from anywhere. That that digital literacy will make a difference in perhaps students' expectations about what is a really useful way of using technology in education. So I think there's a need, and it's great that you guys are facilitating it, a need to really talk about pedagogical practice and perhaps some of the skills that employers are looking for that are broader than just the technical skills.
Yeah, I think you're so right there, and I think being mindful of that and having conversations with employers and people who are involved in employability work and work integrated learning kinds of approaches on our campuses will be definitely people that we need to speak to. And it makes, as you said, that digital literacies also makes me think of librarians, our ever underutilized colleagues who have all this expertise, and I know there's some great work happening in Australia around curating the kinds of information that students will need to help them be literate in terms of their digital capabilities. So I think that's exciting too, and a good reminder that we shouldn't forget about our colleagues in libraries. They're still highly relevant, maybe more relevant than ever.
Well, I've been doing some recent training, so I'm a learning designer. I've got many hats, as many people that sit across organisations do, and it basically teaching other teachers how to use, mostly around webinars, but any kind of online delivery. And what comes up a lot is the thing about copyright, and so some of that's your digital ethics there, and who's your go-to person, because copyright becomes even more front of mind because you're trying to find all these digital resources. So this librarian, I think you're talking about the one that comes out of University of Queensland, that group of is actually helping people find the resources they need and use them, but use them under our copyright laws and make sure that we're using them ethically and correctly as well.
Yeah, there's so many moving parts, aren't there, to the work that we're doing currently. I mean, that's always been the case, but I think, again, this context is just helping to shine a light on the various areas that, as whether we're faculty or learning designers or other administrators, that need to really pay attention. And, we've been speaking about not just how do you do it well, but really how do we do the right thing in this context so that we're addressing equity and access issues and all of the ethical issues that are surrounding not just portfolios, but working online, whether that's learning as you work online or learning as you work online as a worker. So, I think it's an exciting time for that reason that we can begin to start to pay a little more attention to some of these issues that have not all, it's not like they haven't been there previously, but now we can kind of look at them in a new light.
Yeah, they've certainly been brought to the forefront of because what happens is when you put things online and things get recorded or people's practice needs to change, it does kind of expose things that were there before, but we weren't considering them to be important, or we couldn't see them quite so well. Whereas at this point in time, lots of people are having to move their teaching practice online, and really not very clear. Again, very anecdotally from my observation, there wasn't a lot of leadership in that space either. It was kind of, go forward and do it. What we did notice that learning designers became very popular in a very quick period of time. So where they basically would have sat in the background and tried to pitch to people who could make the choices around what's good online practice and use of things like ePortfolios. Their voices weren't being heard very well. But what we did see certainly spike around March and April when I was observing what was happening with some of my colleagues is that everybody wanted for them to be their best friend. So so there was a need to increase people's design and creative thinking from the educator's perspective as well.
Well, you've given us so much wonderful stuff to talk about. I mean, and one of the things that I think is really unique about this particular online event is that it's not the traditional, here are a bunch of concurrent sessions that you can Zoom for 8 hours a day and kind of learn everything that there is to know about portfolios, if that's even possible, but rather, to just have these conversations, start to think through in our own context where we need to consider these various issues and maybe even just where to start, because it could be overwhelming, I'd imagine, for people who are brand new to this space, but we're here to make it not overwhelming for you and to connect you with the communities that exist not just in North America but Australia and in Europe, so that hopefully we can all do our jobs just a little bit better. And I think that's really the value of community. So thank you so much for sharing the Australian perspective, and we're going to look forward to lots more conversation over the course of the event. Thanks so much, Allison.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Thank you.